desk right there. You look, I don't understand my math. Like, yeah.
So Pollitt's article is 2003, which for you folks is a lifetime ago, literally. Colson's 2004. So they're they're not necessarily meant like Colson's as a response to Pollitt or Pollitt a response to Colson, clearly since it comes from before it. But obviously they're taking different stands on an issue. And not that we focus solely on one before getting the other. We can certainly flip-flop and move back and forth. What are things that you just notice about the way that they constructed argument, evidence? What are reactions? What are critiques? What are things that you like? What are things that maybe you did not like? Just kind of like bounce around. So one thing, get us started.
I'm going to say Colson, although I don't agree with you, his argument was very, very well put together. Pollitt took a little more wish-wash.
So you would be, if we were gonna like kind of do a compare contrast, which just doesn't have to turn into, you would consider this one to be more structured, and this one is uneven. Some might say unorganized. And we can kind of get into this a little bit later. Someone in first period was making the argument, not the argument, but the point that what they didn't like about Pollitt's article was it didn't seem until it was like the very end that this is what it's all about. And it didn't necessarily, it didn't necessarily match with how they thought the rest of the argument was going, which we can get into that in a little bit. Maddie?
I feel like both of them kind of made points that were just like completely irrelevant and not related at all to what they were talking about. Like there was one sentence, it just made me laugh.
Only one?
Well, there was one specific sentence that just made me laugh. Surely not even Gilder believes that a heterosexual pothead with plans for murder and suicide would be reformed by marrying a lesbian. What does that mean?
What page is that?
561.
This would be this is Pollitt. This is what like as you flip the page over.
Somebody suggested that the solution to that is marrying a lesbian.
What she is taking a look at, and good point, and I have that sentence underlined too, Maddie.
Wow, we're just on another level.
Marriage is the way. So she's taking a look at what are the reasons that people would get married, and the first thing that she knocks off the list is procreation, because not everyone who's going to get married is going to have kids. What would Colson argue is maybe the main reason to get married, to have kids? And again, it's not that they're structuring this as, one against the other, but his sole, I shouldn't say sole, but the dominant reason for why marriage would take place is procreation or, to have children. She brings up the point that, not everyone who gets married, in a quote-unquote traditional heterosexual marriage is going to have children. I have friends that have children. I think they made a mistake by having children. Hopefully everything turns out okay.
I felt that a little bit.
Just caught me off guard.
Some people are fit to be parents. Some people aren't.
Yeah, it was
Agreed.
So scratch that procreation idea. Marriage is the way that women domesticate men. And so if we're going with the idea that a man will marry a woman and the woman will help rein the male in and get him back to square one. Well, surely not even Gilder believes that a heterosexual pothead with plans for murder and suicide would be reformed by marrying a lesbian, ? She's taken two extremes and putting them together. So there's no reason that these two would probably want to get married in the first place. But if the whole point of marriage is supposed to be man and woman, let's take these two types, put them together. There's no way that that female is going to be able to domesticate that male. And even Gilder would have to agree with that you can't have that possibility 100% of the time. So she is taking a very extreme viewpoint with it. And really, both of them are taking very extreme viewpoints with pretty much everything. But that's where she's kind of going with it. I do think a style that Pollitt doesn't try to use, she does use it, and this is typical in her writing, is she goes with, humor and wit. Sometimes that humor and wit, and this isn't, how dare Maddie not get this or someone else, sometimes that humor and wit just doesn't always quite resonate. And if you're dealing with at the time, and still even today, a pretty serious, heavy social issue, some things don't always mesh well with humor, and that could be an issue here. But that's her style. That's the way that she goes about things. She tends to be very sarcastic, very satirical. And it's not always going to resonate. And that's a tough thing with humor. It just doesn't always work. Sasha, do you?
Yeah, I thought this is like proof sort of that she's actually like putting it towards Discord's argument, kind of listed as proof but didn't really connect it to much.
Okay. Any of the specific examples come up for you more so than the others?
I think like the crime rates with heterosexual marriages that like dissolve.
Okay. And I mean, one of the things that Colson does, and some are going to view it as effective, and some will view it as not quite so effective. He takes a look at crime rates. He tends to have a lot of statistical evidence. Statistical. See, I can't spell. People like numbers. And so if you are in favor of a viewpoint already, and then you get some numbers to kind of back it up, this is like cementing that, yes, this is good, this is really true. You're seeing more of a disconnect between his argument and what those numbers would be, as tend to be quite a lot of other people. What's his argument about the crime rates? And not simply that they're going to go up if you allow, homosexual marriage, same-sex marriage, but how's he putting this together? Because he has a claim, this would be his data. What's the warrant? What's the reasoning? What's the logic? Because he doesn't really always state those things.
Like most criminals grew up without a lack of father figure and mother figure.
So he brings in introduces the notion of a broken home. And for him, a broken home is going to be a home that lacks what kind of figure, Grace? And you're right. He goes specifically a father figure. Okay, so for him, a broken home is something that is going to equal that lacks a father figure. In his mind, then, how does this concept relate to same-sex marriage?
If there's two women and a child,
Okay. So it's a broken home to have two parents. He doesn't get to that point. That means you have twice the chance of not getting, arrested or whatnot, because there would be two father figures. But yeah, if you have two parents, same sex, female in this case, there's not a father, therefore you're not going to have that fatherly advice that we offer. I offer a lot of advice. It is very logical. Then it's going to be a broken home. Then that child is going to be more susceptible to crime and all those kinds of things. You're not buying this. Why not?
Because just because you don't have a father figure, you're still the one making the choices. It doesn't matter what you have at home, you still wouldn't make that choice.
It's like you wrote an essay about choice or something.
Right?
I know. Okay. So there's other factors that's not just going to solely fall down on having a father figure.
He mentioned like projects like inner cities and how they don't have fathers. But how does that tie in? Because usually they do have a father, but something happens.
Traditionally, where do you have a higher crime rate? City. Okay.
What about the factors of an inner city instead of?
So you have a lot more people in a condensed area. You have areas of city where economic development is not there for a variety of reasons. If there is not economic development and employment and jobs, people might resort to stealing money in order or food in order to survive. So crime rates could go up. So the idea is there would be more, not just that you can overcome not having a father figure, but there would be more intervening factors than simply broken home, lacking a father figure. So yeah, I think for us, from a logical fallacy standpoint, we would look at this as being what?
Just the actual situation of the inner city?
It could be. I mean, and there certainly would be other factors, but from like the terminology that we were going over yesterday and on Wednesday, what would be something here that we could take a look at? Lack of father equaling higher crime rate.
I said a slippery slope because it's just like if you don't have this, this is gonna happen. You're gonna be terrible.
And certainly if you're looking at the moving forward, yeah, that would definitely be one. And this is again where we got a lot of overlap. So slippery slope could be one.
I'd say false cause because he's directly relating. Like if you don't have a father, you're gonna do. If you don't have a father figure, it's going to cause.
And that's kind of like the slippery slope, the false cause. This person did not have a father figure, therefore that is why he or she committed crime. Yeah, you could certainly go with that false cause happening there. And you know, we could certainly go with the general term non sequitur, where it simply does not follow, does not match. He would argue, no, this is the case because what does he have experience with? Prison ministry. So he's dealt with a lot of people who are incarcerated, and so he's finding patterns, you know, in his mind. What's the real irony of it, though, when it comes to his prison history? He was in jail for 7 months. Tells you that in a little background bio thing about him. Sasha, remember why? He was involved with the Watergate scandal with Nixon. He was special counsel to the president, and you know, one of the falls came on him, so he's in prison for 7 years. Now, that doesn't mean we have to throw everything that he says out the window because he's a convicted felon, and therefore he has no logic whatsoever, because at that point we would be dealing with ad hominem. We'd be attacking the credibility of the person, not the argument. Here we're going to focus on attacking the argument. But, you know, certainly there's a little bit of irony that would be taking place there. You know, did you come from a broken home? Is that why you got involved with Nixon and Watergate scandal and have to end up going to prison? Other factors could certainly, you know, lead to it. Who's he writing to? I mean, and it's an article. It's not a letter, but who is his audience? And again, you're kind of getting this in a little background, little bio thing that's up at the top. Who's he writing to?
Christianity Today, so Christian people, followers.
So if we're looking on the liberal versus conservative spectrum, he's falling on he himself, conservative. Again, not that this matters so far as, you know, right or wrong, but he's going to certainly be on the conservative angle, and he's going to be probably writing to, or who's going to be reading it, conservative Christian readership. So the evidence, while objectively we're looking at going, this doesn't match, what does his audience probably already hold? The same beliefs that he does. So if we can throw in statistical data, evidence, and things that are going to help back it up, it's going to cement the cause. And at that point, people are going to be shaking their heads and, you know, in agreement with him no matter what. Anything else that he does? Did you notice, like, dislike, or Pollitt? We can kind of go back and forth between.
I wanted to comment on the humor and wit part.
For Pollitt.
I feel like she got annoying at parts. Just her wording and what she was trying to say was just hard to read.
And I mean, this is, and similar to Colson, she is writing to.
Sarcastic.
She's definitely more sarcastic. She's a syndicated columnist. She presently, and at the time, she is married now. I seem surprised. The eyebrows going on. That's her, for lack of a better word, shtick. If you're going to read a Pollitt article, this is probably what you're going to be looking for. And again, she's not writing to, you know, the AP English loving crowd that's going to be analyzing this on September the 20th. but she is a columnist. She is writing in a liberal publication, The Nation, much like his readership probably already agrees with him. Her readership already probably agrees with her. The question becomes, agree with her on what? Because what is her argument? It's pretty clear where this guy stands, Colson. I mean, there's, like it or not, there is no confusion.
It's about the religious aspect of gay marriage.
Okay. And I wouldn't even say the religious aspect of gay marriage. It's about the religious aspect of... So, I mean, and she kind of ends with that whole thing about separation of church and state. So she really is kind of taking a look at this issue. If say your reading check quiz is what's the claim of Pollitt's article, and you were to go, she supports same-sex marriage, that technically wouldn't really be correct at that point, because that's not really what her main focus is.
I actually kind of liked her writing because, I don't know, I feel like it was I mean, it wasn't really formal, so I think that was nice too. But it's also just kind of do what you want kind of thing. Why does it matter? There's so many with the religion, separation of church and state. There's so many different religions. It's just kind of nobody's gonna see eye to eye. So why does it matter? Kind of thing. Maybe that's just my interpretation on it. But I felt like she's just very okay, this is so wrong to you, but you think this is wrong too from another religion, and they think
And when you're saying why does it matter, it being same-sex marriage,
yeah.
right? Okay. What's her title?
What's wrong with gay marriage?
And the punctuation for that is a question. So she's literally throwing out a question. Okay, so far as her title. What's a dominant literary technique that she uses throughout her essay, her article, her writing? She's throwing out rhetorical questions. Okay? So she's someone who is kind of raising these questions and looking for audience participation. Colson's not looking for you to participate. He's looking for you to nod your head in agreement and go, yes, I think you're right, Charles. Good point, good point. If you're friends with him, you might call him Chuck. I don't know. So, I think there's two different things going on. I would say her issue with dealing with separation of church and state, and it's not that she attacks the Catholic Church, it's not that she attacks the Protestant Church, it's not that she attacks Jews, it's not that she attacks Muslims, she basically is attacking all religions, it's not focusing on simply one. She's not saying down with religion, but she is going religious viewpoints shouldn't govern what we view as being right or wrong. How does she fit that into the readership, into what's happening in U.S. society and culture in 2003? She takes the topic of the day and she makes that fit. So she's not really, I would say, writing about same-sex marriage. She's writing about that separation of church and state, but that gives her an avenue to explore. So she is not, and not that this would be a reason maybe why Douglas, you found it, not as, I won't say convincing, but pleasant to read. She doesn't really care about that. She's doing more, some would argue, a rant about that separation of church and state, but it's not that focused, clear position that Colson has. What's Colson's claim? Besides saying societal suicide, stealing from the society, what is his ultimate claim? When it's all said and done, what's he trying to communicate to the audience, to the readership in Christianity today? Okay.
Yes.
It's always beautiful in the brain,
Yeah.
and then gay marriage does not equal marriage. Syntactically, how do you know that, Dan?
What's marriage?
Every time same-sex or gay marriage gets mentioned, those quotation marks show up. And some people get annoyed with that,
Oh, yeah.
that did it in quotation marks again. Why did you do it again? He has to. Because for him, it is not marriage. It can't be. If marriage is all about procreation, same-sex marriage cannot be marriage because same sex, same gender, unless we're talking about adoption or scientific developments, are not going to have children. So it can't be the same thing. So for him, and again, not meaning, okay, now you must respect the argument or everything that he's doing, he can't write this without those quotation marks. It would just burn every fiber in his existence. And I think it's easier with an article as opposed to a 602-page novel to see where syntax can kind of show up. Even though we're not taking a look at the sentence structure or arrangement of the words, quotation marks certainly would fall into that category. Syntax is punctuation, as well as the arrangement of words. Generally, when do you have quotation marks showing up in a text? Usually when you have people talking, so like when Cal's talking to Aaron, talking to Adam, talking to Kathy, you see quotation marks showing up. Steinbeck has books where he doesn't use quotation marks. You want to get confused, read a conversation, Diana, where there are not any quotation marks. And he'll switch it. In some chapters he'll have quotation marks, in other chapters he won't. And so if you identify the quotation marks as being an individual speaking, when he has a lack of punctuation of quotation marks when people are speaking, it's not Brady speaking, it's not Stella speaking, it's not Jess speaking or Tori, but it could be a group of people kind of speaking, a collective thought, could be a region thought, could be a national thought, spokesperson, kind of like an everyman character. So you can certainly manipulate, the way that you present words and ideas to fit your agenda, and that's certainly what he's doing there with marriage. He cannot write it any other way. I think, anything else jumping out of people? I think within Colson's article too, a place where sometimes folks get a little confused, like we have the Gilder, like what do we mean by that part in Pollitt? In paragraph 6, I think sometimes he kind of starts to lose, not readership necessarily, but maybe some logic or understanding that's taking place. Critics agree with this, but claim gay marriage will not weaken heterosexual marriage. The evidence says that they're wrong. So critics agree with this, but claim that gay marriage will not weaken heterosexual marriage. Evidence says that they're wrong. So his argument would be same-sex marriage is just going to weaken marriage in general, which a lot of people think might look as two unrelated things. Stanley Kurtz of the Hoover Institution writes, it follows that once marriage is redefined to accommodate same-sex couples, that change cannot help but lock in and reinforce the very cultural separation between marriage and parenthood that makes gay marriage conceivable to begin with. He cites Norway, where courts imposed same-sex marriage, quotation marks again, in 1993, a time when Norwegians enjoyed a low out-of-wedlock birth rate. After the imposition of same-sex marriage, Norway's out-of-wedlock birth rate shot up as the link between marriage and childbearing was broken and cohabitation became the norm. So what is he looking at as being related to one another? Right. So, and again, just to clarify, out of wedlock means you're going to have children outside of marriage. So you're not, love the term, locked, into marriage. Do you see a relationship between same-sex marriage and out of wedlock birth rates? Assuming, and the assumption would be the out of wedlock birth rates are between heterosexual couples.
I don't get how that doesn't connect because same-sex marriages, they can't have kids, so it's not like they're not married.
So how can people who can't have kids affect those who can have kids?
So it's just like.
Anyone see where he's coming from? Oh no.
Don't be.
Yeah, I think his idea that marriage is directly linked to procreation is that gay marriage destroys that, so that people won't get married and have kids.
This term, which and for him, it would be the one without quotation marks. Dylan's right, is sacred. Okay, there's a covenant that's taking place. If we want to throw out maybe some religious terminology, if we allow this one to take place, then that that sacredness of the covenant of marriage can't be held up for everyone. Because if we allow these two men or these two women to be married, and we have to take those quotation marks, off that term, and apparently the G and the E, then it's not going to be the same for everyone. So if you're allowing two males to get married, why would a heterosexual couple feel the need to get married? They could just cohabitate, live together, have children. He doesn't say that, though, but he's relying on you to kind of make a connection with it.
It just confuses me because you think the way the argument is structured is like, don't you think they go down because more people are getting married, so more people are? Like, it's just confusing the way he structures it. Because it's like, it's almost going against what he's trying to prove.
And I think the reason that he does it, besides and I have no doubt that he truly sees like this connection, and I'm not criticizing anyone who agrees with him. Okay, I think there are certainly more factors that would go into Norway's out of wedlock birth rate in the early '90s than simply going same-sex marriage is allowed. In the U.S., I don't know what the rates would be, but in the early '90s compared to now, you had a lot of more teenage pregnancy out of wedlock birth rates taking place than current. And certainly we didn't have same-sex marriage, being legalized in the early '90s. So there's a lot of factors. Again, that oversimplification. You mentioned the false cause before. I think you could take a look at this being it as well. But again, who's he writing to?
It's a bunch of Christians.
Who are probably married. So now what does this do? Not married, but married. This marriage could affect me, or even though, okay, I'm married, it might not affect my marriage, but my children's marriage, or marriage of the future. So this is a problem that I need to deal with, not just something that government officials and same-sex couples and all that kind of stuff have to do. And that's how the warrant kind of starts to take place, but you got to make those inferences, like as Dylan was doing for us, to realize how all these things would come together.
Like that almost like the person who had my book before, it's like how it says it's forced, like that kind of like parallels it to me because like it's allowed, it's like forcing something on your marriage, like it doesn't affect, like he's saying it like affects you, and it's because it's like forced on because it's allowed. Like I just think it's parallel, like it doesn't have to affect you, it affects you if you let it.
Yeah, and I think the majority of readers, especially, not saying you people because you're young or anything like that, I think in today's world would probably more so agree with that. Certainly not everyone is going to be, and that's okay. He would feel that it is forced upon you because as a married person, as a pious Christian, it's his responsibility to make sure that this covenant is upheld and that it is properly viewed. And that's where Pollitt would come in, as Maddie was referencing and Douglas was too. That's religion. That shouldn't have anything to do with what's going to happen in the U.S. court system and what's going to be accepted. So again, you're dealing with someone who is looking at kind of freedom of choice. You have someone who's taking a look at religious, like law. There's no way they're ever going to kind of come to an agreement with it. And yeah, it as a traditionally married individual, do I feel that same-sex marriage is affecting my marriage? No. But I can see the viewpoint where that idea could come from. Well, my kids will never get married because they're just not going to feel the need to. Some would be upset about it. I'm thinking, think of all that money the Kane family won't have to dish out. How I feel better. Then college, just start thinking about it, and then it goes down. Anything else?
Her structure in Colson's essay, paragraph 7, he uses that as his counter argument almost.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like he doesn't exactly resolve it. I think it looks like counters just he brings his counter argument and then almost doesn't even use it.
And I think for both of them, this is really where you do kind of see a dynamic change between writing an essay in English class for school as opposed to writing something for a publication. Because ultimately, what does the publisher want the article to do? Make waves, get a reaction. And in some ways, you know, that's why Pollitt can go with her witty sarcasm and start attacking everyone, because someone's going to be offended by it, which means then there's going to be complaints and arguments and people are reading it. And in some ways, I think you want to kind of leave it open. That then allows for more debate argument that can come from it. As far as being a properly structured argument, both of them fall short. You know, with if you're looking at okay, write about same-sex marriage under 18. Got it.